Hello, how's everybody doing? So last minute change. Some of you might have known for a while now that Sir Wade was going to be doing a conversation with today. Last minute change of events or change of plans. Actually, he got surprised by his wife with a last minute getaway. They both got their COVID vaccinations, and to celebrate, they decided to go on a small trip. So that's full disclosure. So I'm not going to tell you where he went, so you can't go find him. He's going to enjoy that trip with his wife, obviously. So he will be coming. We rescheduled it for I think it's sometime in July. So stay tuned for that. And so instead of just leaving the airwaves completely empty, David, Hubert, and I decided we would take a minute to try to do a new type of format, a new type of content format that we've been talking about for a little while. We call it live Q&A. The idea behind this is that we do a lot of live streaming now, as you've probably noticed, and there's questions often at the end of those live streams, and there's always amazing questions that get left on the table that we always feel kind of bad that didn't get answered, because there's some great questions that people can learn a lot of great things from. So, and there's also just people out there that are part of the community that have questions. They're like, you talked about this a long time ago. When is it happening? Or have you guys thought about doing something like that? Like, we want this to kind of feel like a bit like a town hall. It will get specialized, I think, as we understand this format better and try it out in a couple different ways. I think we have plans for bringing in some specialists in certain areas so that we can actually have a themed Q&A. So if you have like rigging questions, you can like hold on to them until we have like a rigging Q&A, and who knows what else. We can feature whoever on a format like this, and it's just a great way to just turn it into a complete Q&A. That's all it's all about. Just sure, there'll be some good conversation, but it'll come from the questions as opposed to, it'll be all about chat, really, I guess is really what I'm saying. These kinds of streams are all about directly interfacing with everyone in chat. So there's some nice interactivity there. So without further ado, let me bring in Mr. Hubert himself, and we're going to start going through these questions. I think what we're going to do is start with a backlog of questions that have been gathered from past streams, but at the end of the hour, what we'll do is we'll open it up to the floor, and people can ask whatever the heck they want, assuming that David and I have answers. No pressure, David. Speaking of which, hello, David.
Hey, Brent.
How are you?
I'm good.
That's good.
Pretty excited. That's something that we've been talking about for a while, and I think it was definitely inspired with seeing so many great questions. We're like, we didn't have time to get to this one. Hopefully, with another guest, and they kind of pile up and they disappear.
They do.
Hopefully, we keep them on a spreadsheet so we can bring them back. And on top of that, it's all recorded, so it'll be easy afterwards to kind of chop. All right, well, this question here's our 5-minute answer to this, because there's many of those questions that are coming back often. So hopefully with time, with our search engine that's going to evolve over time on Agora.Community, it'll be easy to, what about demo reel? Boom, 6 different questions that have been answered by many different people.
Exactly.
So yeah, so we have a couple questions from past guests that we didn't have time to look at then. At the same time, if chat has any question related to the topic that we'll be discussing or anything else, just throw anything our way and we'll decide if we answer it or not.
Exactly. And I'll apologize in advance because I'm not going to keep muting myself because I'll forget to unmute myself. So I'll be doing a little bit of typing on my keyboard right here, just because I'm going to be putting things up into the caption window below, just so everyone can stay tuned and keep track of the actual questions being asked. Another thing too to note is that what was I? No, I remember what I was going to say.
What is it?
No, yeah, it's even got you. The suspense is killing you. I was just going to say one of our first the first times that we recognized this as a thing, like, oh my God, there's all these great questions, is because after JD, and when JD was on not so long ago, he was very interested in the questions. As a matter of fact, he was like, "Can you give me the questions?" Because he wanted to follow up with his community, because he knew a lot of people from his community were actually watching. So this is also an answer to this as well. So it's just sort of try to kind of make sure that people have a chance to answer them. And so sometimes we'll even be able to forward some of these questions off to the appropriate person and see if we can get some sort of official response. So anyways, all that being said, I guess we can start. I forgot to ask you before the stream that there's this list here that you'd already kind of created from the backlog. There's 2 different colors. Is there a reason for the colors, or should I not care about that?
Yes, the one in orange would be the one that let's start with that list.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. So first one up, let's try this. Post captions here. All right, boom.
Oh, no boom.
Did it not happen? Oh, I see why. There we go. There, boom for real this time. So this question is, how can I get a job as an animator if I don't have good skills in acting and lip sync animation?
That's interesting. There is many ways to tackle this one. I mean, for me, I never considered myself having good acting skills. I've developed the minimal amount of acting skills that I needed just to be able to film some reference myself. But I've often relied on other animators that were better actors than me to shoot those refs. So having good acting skills is definitely a good bonus to have, but I would not see it as something that is essential to have a good career as an animator. The lip sync part, for me, this one is, well, just become good at it. That's the only thing. It's unless you want to specialize into motion capture editing and you never want to tackle facial animation. But if you want to have a broad range of opportunity, and for me, lip sync, it's not like you have a natural skills or talent for lip sync. No, you just learn how to do it properly and
just put the time in.
That's it. Yeah. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think that there's lots of jobs out there that you can get that don't focus on because like when I think of lip sync, like really good lip sync and very, very good acting skills, I'm thinking about usually like long format, like feature film stuff, like Pixar, DreamWorks. These kind of films are going to it's par for the course. You can't really escape it. You're going to need to spend the time. And while you're saying that you wouldn't consider yourself a good actor, there's a difference between being a good actor and having acting skills and having good instincts on a good performance, like the be able to sort of wear the skin of the character and understand them and get inside the head. And this is something that Ed Hooks talks a lot about, right? This is why he kind of became a specialist in speaking to animators about acting, but not in a formal way. Like what do animators need to understand about acting? And really, it's just about, it's about observing human psychology and just observing human interactions and understanding it, breaking it down, taking the time to think about it. But there's a lot of jobs out there that don't focus on these two things. And I think video game animation is a good example. Although I would often say that you still need to be able to put a good performance even in game animations. So you're not going to be completely off the hook for a decent looking performance, because we are entertainers at the end of the day, right? We can't even, just because we're moving characters around on the screen to serve some of the purposes of a player's desire to move a character, doesn't mean that it shouldn't be awesome and shouldn't instill some sort of player fantasy. And part of that is the animation that we put on there. So,
and I think there's also a certain limit of how good of an actor. Obviously, if it's a natural talent, then even better for you. But in my experience, when I said I just developed the minimum requirement as acting skills, because let's say you shoot some reference for your own shot in an animated feature. Well, you're probably alone with the camera, or maybe with a coworker or something like that. But you can literally like shoot ref forever, like 40 different versions, until you start to pick up something. And even when you pick up something, it can be from multiple take. Oh, I kind of like what I did in this take, and it kind of fit with this part, and so you kind of Frankenstein a little bit a performance, and then you can try to remimic the entire performance, or just keep the edit. So it's, you don't need to be on par with someone that would go do a play or something like that to have a very valuable skill that you can use as an animator.
Yep. And I'll say one last thing too, just on this topic, because I think it's a good one. I would also come at this from a different angle. Rather than being worried about you don't have those skills, I think that I always tell animators that a good way to level up in a way that they may not immediately think about would be to take an acting class. Like, God forbid you actually go and get in part, like people who do improv, think about improv, because improv is a really good example of this, because improv teaches you to, like, it's all about flow. The flow of thought, and to not like put too many blockers. It's like you want to just take an idea and run with it. And that kind of inspiration and that kind of spontaneity is very, very helpful. A very helpful muscle to flex, because and to get very strong, because it'll help you on the production floor when you're trying to come up with good ideas or good gags or just good concepts altogether. And I think the other benefit will become that you won't be as you won't be as stiff and nervous in front of a camera, because I know most animators are. And your best reference is yourself. If you can shoot yourself with video, then you can build a really good reference for yourself. But the reference is only going to be as good as your performance in front of it, right? So the better you get, and no one ever needs to see those videos. It's all just for you, so you don't have to be scared or embarrassed. It's like 100% you trying to be a character, and then be able to like learn from that, because you're better at if you can channel that sort of real time performance. You might be able to capture something all that much more believable. So don't be shy. Get out there.
And even if you're shy, just do it, and just the fact of doing it, you'll get used to it. You might never get to a point that you will deeply enjoy it, but you might at least get to a point that, like, it's part of the work, and I don't mind doing it anymore.
Yeah, I can tell you, as someone who has to put themselves in front of the camera every single day and put themselves out there, that was not easy at the beginning. It's hard for everybody. Like I'm comfortable with it now. I think probably mostly because I taught online for so long, and that was the beginning of my learning curve. And David's done that as well. So we have an unfair advantage because we maybe got a bit of a head start on it. But now here we are, and we're putting ourselves out there because we feel comfortable. And you need to be able to feel just as comfortable if you want to put yourself in front of a camera and capture your own reference. So as David said, just do it. Just get used to it and make it happen. Okay, next question.
Brent, if you don't mind, I'm keeping a little
okay, sure.
eye on the chat, so maybe once in a while, not all of them, but
so it doesn't get buried.
If there's that amount of text, we might have time to read it all.
No problem.
There was a short one that was interesting here. What are some red flags from the employer that the applicant should look out for during the interview?
This is an easy question. If their first name is Petar, that is for sure a big red flag for me. Very big, Petar. I'm watching you, buddy. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So you're just thinking in general, what things should just so everyone knows, I'm not just singling Pedar. Pedar is actually in my iAnimate class this term. So I'm just, having a little bit of fun. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you think, David?
I would say, well, for me, it kind of depends what you're looking for. So I have a very easy example. If you're looking like, you're passionate about animation, you like it, but you also have young kids, a family, you have other activities on the side, and you're really looking for a steady 35 hours a week, a job that you're going to provide your best, but that's what you can offer. And in the interview, they are bragging how people are working hard and they stay in the evening and the weekend and all that. I would say this example might be easy, but just know what you're looking for. And if you see that they are, taking pride of something that doesn't fit at all with what you're looking for, it might be a red flag that, well, it just might not be for you. So I would say that's maybe one thing. Know what you want when you're getting there. Know what you're ready to give. Know what you might not be. And if you see that there's a big emphasis on a part that you would not be ready to commit to, and maybe specifically ask question about it, then that would be a red flag that may be for you specifically. So that would be one thing from you.
Full disclosure, I read the question completely wrong, which explains my terrible joke earlier. It's red flags that for the applicant. So if I got that from David's answer. So yeah, okay, that's a really good question, because we always have to remember that the interviews are supposed to be bi-directional, and that might not feel like that if it's your first job interview because you're really excited about your first job, and naturally you're going to be willing to let certain things slide that eventually you probably would never. But you still need to be careful, because I think you could find yourself, like David sort of described, you might find yourself an environment where the culture may be a little bit toxic to who you are. So if you are not a workaholic and you really love diving, full steam ahead into something, you might be a little wary about someone bragging about all the overtime that people are putting in all the time. Overtime is a really sensitive issue, and we covered this a couple times on some of the streams that we've already had. And overtime, and I always boil overtime down into one simple way. If it's overtime that people are putting in because they feel they are driven to do it, they want to put the extra time in voluntarily because they want to do a better job, and they're just trying to finish that shot, or they're just trying to finish something that they're really proud of. That's the type of good overtime. Even that type of overtime cannot be super sustained forever. And I think the management needs to be careful, keep a watchful eye on that. The bad type of overtime is the one that it's just because it's bad planning all the time, and it always falls to the employees, and it's forced upon everybody, mandatory overtime. This is some teams, which will remain nameless. Some companies have made a bit of a reputation for that. So it's not just things that you're looking out for looking out for in an interview, but you might want to do a little bit of research. Check some of the forums. Check Reddit. Just go out there and ask generally on the internet what it's like to work for a certain company, because maybe there's even a bunch of questions you might be able to ask during the interview that might kind of get to the bottom of maybe some of your concerns.
I would say maybe for my next idea, maybe it kind of depends of who is interviewing you. There's a big difference if it's the HR department than if it's actually the supervisor that you'll be working with. But if you have the chance to be having an interview with your immediate supervisor, I would say being very sensible to any negative behavior like cynicism, complaining about someone else's work, being super critical about the team of your about the work that some of the team has done. And I would say that with a few of those, maybe you'll have your kind of spidey sense that says, "Ooh, that doesn't." I don't know what it is exactly, but I don't feel that that's going to be a fun environment to work in. Usually it doesn't mean that it'll be the case, but usually those early signs might be a sign of things to come. So maybe be wary about some of those negative comments or behavior that would be showcased during that interview.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of another one. I had an idea in my head as to another good possible red flag that that could happen. I think that for me, I when I'm looking for a job, I want to make sure I'm putting myself in a position where I'm actually going to grow. So I'd be very wary as someone who's a bit more junior, who would be taking a job where they wouldn't have the support of someone who they see as someone they're going to learn a lot from. This is a really big part of the early part of your career. Is you don't want to find yourself, for instance, in a small team where you're the only animator. I mean, if that's something that you're excited by, then by all means do it. But just know going in that you might not really get much. You're going to be learning on your own. You'll be like learning by trial and error, as opposed to being supported by someone who's going to take you under their wing. I mean, this came up in the TED T discussion, where back in the good old days when we were doing it all by hand, the assistants, the junior animators, were always under the tutelage of an animator, as someone more senior than them, and we were actually working with that person's drawings. We were doing in-betweens, we were doing breakdowns, we were literally absorbing all the work that all the decisions were being made, so we could sort of reverse engineer and understand and learn vicariously through that experience. It was part of the job. Like there's no escaping the fact you were going to learn, and it's different now in 3D because there's not that there. So instead, what it ends up being is having at least someone to ask questions, someone who can look at your work and give you feedback. These are very important. So if it feels like that's something you really want, try to make sure that you're going to get that, and that should come up in the interview. Ask who the supervisor might be if they're not actually the one meeting with you, and then maybe you can do a little bit of homework before you do, decide on that job.
Yep. I agree.
Okay, so what should we do? I guess we'll just ping pong back and forth. We got.
Let's go with the backlog. One of the questions we had in the backlog.
Okay, 1 second. Just have to paste it here. Here it comes. So, how long in hours does it take to learn animation? Wow. Well, actually, I'm glad you asked. The answer is 7,212. Yeah, it's a very specific question. It seems like it's asking for a very specific answer.
That's a tough one to answer.
Yeah.
I would say if I'm trying to reflect on my
the problem is everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some people like tear through it. Like there are some people that and people have heard this before, but I often refer to them as jerks. People who are just pick it up way too easily and they just make us all mad. There are people like that, and you're going to have to deal with it. And the most of us are a bit more average, and
exactly. I mean, how good are your computer skills? How fast are you to learn a new software? Do you have drawing skills? Do you have any other skills that would kind of?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I did a 1 year private school, at which point when I graduated, I knew the software. I knew how to. It was Softimage in the day, but it could be Maya. So I felt that like one year of education to be really comfortable with the software, it'd be kind of a generalist with no experience. I mean that you can do anything with a professional 3D software. For me, it was 1 year. Right there. I would say it probably took me another 3 years to consider myself a decent animator. That could maybe have shortened in a year if I was just focusing on that. And maybe after that, another 5 years before I considered myself being a good animator, which again, maybe could be condensed in 1 year. So my first idea would be, I don't know, maybe 3 years. If you dedicate, you start, you don't know anything about 3D, you don't know any CG software, and after 3 years, you could be tagged as a good animator. There is obviously, a rule that said 10,000 hours, which is roughly 5 years. So maybe to become, a really, really good animator, again, if you dedicate full time to it, but who's your instructor? Who is going to provide you reviews? Who's going to provide you guidance? How fast are you able to learn? What do you already know? Are you a musician that has rhythm naturally? Are you someone that's good with drawing? So it means that posing for you will be easier. Do you have a good sense of 3D perspective, so you can understand 3D really well? Are you technical, meaning that you will learn the software quickly, but you can even script yourself some tools to make animation even faster? There's so many variables. But
exactly,
yeah, I would say for me, 3 years would be my guess if I had to commit to something. 3 years full time.
My answer would be forever, because I mean, truthfully, we're always learning how to animate. Now, I'm learning, David's learning. What we're focusing on is different. Like I feel like my learning is more about how to properly support animators, because I do a lot more directing these days than I do actual animating. But that's still learning, right? So you have to learn a lot about animation so that you can actually help articulate your thoughts and the feedback, so that your animators under your guidance have what they need to be better. So it's just a learning process all the time. I think the question is, how long does it take to become a viable, like marketable animator? Then yeah, I think what David said is right. I think the average is somewhere between probably 2 and 3 years. I've seen it happen faster, but I've also seen it take longer. So what you need to do is, I would not set a goal in time for yourself. I think that is a recipe for possible reason to be sort of disappointed. And I don't think you want to do that to yourself. I think you need to, like David said, everyone's got different backgrounds. Some people have a head start in some areas. So, at the end of the day, I've watched animators, having worked at schools before, like brick and mortar schools, like Dawson College here in Montreal. It's a 3-year program. And I know that by 3 years, the people that are dedicating a lot of time and effort during those 3 years, these people get jobs. I think the 3 years, so that 3-year mark seems to be a pretty good recipe. There's a reason why college courses have been 3 years traditionally, and it's because that's how long experts in education have decided would be an average time that people would need in order to be marketable by the time of that 3 years is up. So I don't think it's and it's interesting that David brought up the 10,000, because that sounds a bit more like what you would get if you were to go to university and maybe take a 3-year bachelor and maybe another couple years get a master's. Well, that sounds about right. It sort of hits the nail around the head, the sweet spot. And then if you want to go beyond that, then of course you'd be doing a PhD, which is several more years after that. And at that point, you are then quite literally not just a master, but like a pro. You are at the point where you are now in a position to tell everybody else what's right and what's wrong, because you've done that much dedication in that subject. So yeah, it's different for everybody, and it depends on how you attack that problem. 100%. Yeah. But don't set rigid limits for yourself, because it's not fair. It's not fair to yourself.
And obviously we're framing this question by a sense of becoming a good professional animator, because how long does it take to learn animation if you're just following a tutorial that's going to show you exactly where to click in Maya to have a bouncing ball? I don't know, 6 hours maybe, but technically you animated, but it takes much more than that to become a professional animator. That's for sure.
I'm scanning the questions here in chat. This is a good one. This is like a question in real time. I like this. We're like a lifeline that you're reaching out to right now. Hey, I'm actually in the middle of an FPS animation right now. When the character runs, how convenient. If only you had a couple of people that have been animating for years at your disposal, you could ask this question. That'd be amazing. Wait a minute. Right now, when the character runs on top of a big man, I don't know if that might have been a typo, in front of him and do some fight combo, I have to say that I have some struggle to start it. I don't really know on what I should focus on first. So let me paraphrase this. If you're still in chat, then let me know if I've got this right. But I guess what you're essentially talking about is there are two characters that need to interact, and they're going to be like touching, like they're going to be contacting one another, and there's going to be some sort of struggle. That's what it sounds like. If you're here, let me know. We're gonna proceed with that assumption, and then let me know if I've made a terrible mistake in chat. So yeah, do you want me to take a first stab at this, David, and then you?
Oh yeah, it's definitely in your role. In your realm of expertise.
Okay, we'll see. So so FPS animation. So is it? I guess it's for a game, I assume. That's a terrible assumption, because there's been movies that have had FPS like moments, but I'm going to assume also, for the sake of this answer, that it is. The thing about paired animations in games in general is that, well, let's break it down. As far as the animation craft itself, what you need to do, in my opinion, is you need to understand the mechanics and the cause and effect relationship between the two. What I usually do is I allow myself to set key poses on whatever frame I need per character. until they actually make contact with one another. At which point you're kind of forced to, whenever a character needs a key pose to express an important moment of the action, you have to key them both, because obviously if you didn't, they would be slipping all over the place. So what I tend to do is spend a lot of time figuring out the choreography and the staging of it all. And then I just spend the time making sure that I pose it. And what I actually do is I don't trouble myself. And this is a very personal choice. I don't trouble myself so much with constraints early on. I first want to make sure that I can just do some sort of block pass of staging and not worry so much that there's not going to be any slipping during the interpolation between those poses. Because what I want to make sure first, and this is where a lot of people unfortunately go wrong, is because they get too technical too early, and they kind of paint themselves or they animate themselves into a corner, and they realize in the end, after they get everything technically working, that they're not really happy with the animation at all. So I would rather put something blocked in where the two of them are playing in this animation and that would synchronize them, get that in the engine really early, and then check it. Make sure that the cadence of that animation is good, and make sure that it works like it's readable from the camera that it would be typically seen from. Make sure that you've checked all your main staging things first. The other technical side of this question is you're going to need to make sure that the project you're working on has technology that supports the fact that these, what we often call paired animation in games, are historically difficult to get right, because of science, I guess. It's because the engine often needs to be told how to do that. How do you get those two characters to align in space and time in order for those two, because they're at the end of the day, they will typically be two separate animations. Now, this can be handled with something like the sequencer in Unreal, where it's like you feed it a bunch of different characters and a bunch of different animation tracks, and the sequencer is what syncs them, because it's a way of synchronizing a whole pile of things that you want in a scene to one common timeline, so that will give you what you're looking for. But if you're looking for something a bit more like in real, like a real-time game, a real-time moment in a game, it would be it's a little bit more technical. So you're going to have to follow up with whoever the technical animator is to find out how to approach that problem. So I know it's a long answer, but I didn't want to just sort of gloss over it. It's I would first worry about the staging, I guess, is my thing, but also think about the technical aspects to make sure you have a plan to get it to play properly.
Cool. I see another question from Peter that is actually linked to the question before. That could be quite fast to answer. Do employers ever has trick questions? Can you bring this one?
Yeah, I'm looking
Brent?
for it.
It's the third one from the top. So the question is, do employers ever ask trick questions, question with double meaning during an interview? And if so, what are they and how to handle them? Maybe, but honestly, don't ask yourself that question during the interview, because you will, in real time, trying to process and overanalyze those questions, and it will show, and you will look very genuine in your answer just by the time that you'll try to figure out. So, for instance, there was what are your long-term goals, right? Is that a trick question? Because maybe they, for whatever, don't even bother. Just be genuine, be truthful. Yeah. What is your long-term goal? Well, I'd like to have a little bit of experience here because my long-term goal is to become a Disney animator. That's the truth. That's your answer. Don't double, don't double think it. Don't try to answer something that you think that they want to hear. Most of the time you might be wrong, but all of the time it will look like you're trying to figure out an answer instead of just answering what naturally comes. So to answer the question, yes, maybe, but who cares? Don't pay attention to it and just answer whatever is the real answer to the question. Yeah, and I would just say that if it means that you are not a good fit for that studio, or the studio is not a good fit for you, well, great. This will have been figured out more rapidly than after 1 year at the studio of not being happy there.
Trust me, you would rather dodge that bullet early than have to live through an unpleasant experience where you could have known right away by just seeing the writing on the walls during the interview and like listen to yourself when there was a red flag that went up. Because it's just not worth it. You would have been much more better worth your time to go to a company that you were a better fit with. I agree with David. I think being genuine and coming off as genuine is much more valuable than worrying about, because I mean, here's the thing. Like, if it's a trick question and you're answering it honestly, well then, like, okay, like, I mean, they're obviously, like, if as long as you answer it honestly, then who cares if they're like, oh well, that's not the answer we were looking for. Well, like that, okay, great. So that, I guess, obviously I'm not a very good fit for the job then, because I answered that question very honestly. I don't think you want to be putting yourself in a situation where you need to sort of double guess yourself all the time. That would suck.
Yep. Let's go back in the backlog.
Yeah, I got one right here. This is another doozy. Wow. If only I knew the answer to that question, it would be so much easier.
We're still looking.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's possible to answer this question, because like you would have to dig into the what is an animator. Like, there's so many different types of animator.
The first thing I would say is, what makes a good animator, what makes a good human being.
Yeah.
Because, let's put ourselves in a workplace. Even more important than your artistic and technical skills, are you someone that people want to hang out with? Are you agreeable with the people around you? Or are you, a cynic? Or do you always complain? Or is there always a reason why everything is going wrong? And do you always criticize the work of others? So what is a good animator? Just be a good person. Just be kind. Just be, genuine, truthful. All the behavior that you would be expecting from the people around you. I would say that would be a very good start. That's for sure.
I think the only thing that I would say is one quality that I think every animator needs is, and this is something you can train yourself to be better at, is just being a naturally curious person who is, who's very observant. Because at the end of the day, that's what animators are doing, right? They need to be able to break things down that move, understand why they move the way that they do, so that they can then recreate that movement on an otherwise inanimate object. I think that it is an inanimate digital object if you're in your 3D, or like a clay figure if you're using claymation or something like that. But the idea is that skill is something that needs to be trained, because I see a lot of new people that are trying to animate. That's the thing that holds them back the most, is that I'll tell them, look, we're all going to use the same reference. Here are the poses we should be using. I want everyone to be able to recreate those poses. And it never ceases to amaze me how off they are often. And I'm just like I've been doing it for a while, so it's hard for me to connect with it. But sometimes they're really off, almost to the point where I'm like, did you even look at the frame, like the image? Because I don't know if you are. And obviously, it comes down to just being carefully observant. It's not just enough that you glance at it. It's that you're really trying to break it down. Have you ever seen Leonardo da Vinci's sketches in his sketchbook? This is the thing that always fascinated me about Leonardo da Vinci. He was not just an artist. This guy was like an engineer, because he was breaking things down. Life, everything around him interested him so much that he was like calculating, and he was measuring, and he was like, I'm not saying you have to sneak into like, a medical student's lab and like draw cadavers like he was doing. But like, you need to be operating on that same level of curiosity to get really good really fast, I think.
Yeah, and also being reliable is definitely something that is going to be expected on the workplace. But what makes a good animator? I mean, there's so many different. Two good animator could have a complete different set of skills. One could be a awesome and very fast motion capture editor, and the other one never touched mocap of his entire life and is just a pure stylized performance kind of animator that will perform well there. So there's so many different aspects of being an animator that varies. I would say those are the first few things I would have in mind. Brent, you're muted.
I said I wasn't going to do it, and I did it anyways. This is actually a question from, it didn't come up. Oh yeah, it's Suhar. There it is. So to go off of Petter's question, is the question, what are your long-term goals? A trick question? Is this a way for a player to test to see if you'll stay with their company in the long run? It's hard to know, right? It depends on the person asking that question. Some people might be just genuinely asking. I mean, you have to always ask yourself, always put yourself in the shoes of the would-be employer, right? What are their needs? Are they looking for someone to help out short term? Are they looking for someone who's going to be able to commit to a 3-year long project? This is a big deal, because especially if you're a bit newer, there's going to be an expectation of a bit of training probably. And therefore they don't want to go and hire someone who's going to just stick around for like 6 months and then be gone. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes that happens, and the employer's looking to try to protect their interests by just weeding out people that don't have the intentions of really sticking it out for the 3-month, contract or whatever it might be. And some game companies are still hiring on a full-time basis, and no company is going to hire you full-time if they knew that you're only going to be there for 3 months. Now, obviously, if it's not a good fit, then what happens. But I think the assumption is that everyone's hoping going into this transaction that both parties are going to be satisfied, and that they can invest in you and you can invest in them. So, I mean, you can call it a trick question if you want, but I mean, at the end of the day, they need answers to questions, because they need to hire someone who's going to fill a production need. And you
muted yourself again.
Bump the space bar like I always do. I don't know if you should see it as a trick question. I think you should just see it as an honest, a legitimate question that you need to answer. And you don't need to. I mean,
in my experience, or maybe it's just a question of perception, but every interview that I went into, I felt that whoever was interviewing me was, cheering for me and hoping that it would go well, because it means that they could hire me, and they won't have to continue endlessly this interview process with. So there might be a way of perception. Maybe some people are a little bit more anxious, and they kind of feel that most of the situation people are there to assess them, and there's other personality that are just they don't even think about it, and they just go in it. So it might be part of it, but I would say, even if there are some interviewers that have trick question, in my experience, it's a minority, to a point that it would not even be worth having your radar on when you go in to those interviews and prepare for maybe having to deal with a trick question. You're still muted, Brent. You need to put some tape on your space bar.
So annoying. 1 second. I'm just trying to reply to Girly Bits. Actually, Girly Bits, rather than me actually replying to you, can you the answer is yes. If you could separate your questions, because I'm making an assumption because it's Girly Bits that's a she, but you had one post that had many questions. It'd be easier if you break them up into separate ones. I'll check them down at the bottom. I have another question here going to pop up that was good. This is a really good one. I like this one a lot. How to not get discouraged when getting feedback that makes you feel incompetent.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It is a good one, because it happens to all of us. Let me tell you, it's a tricky one. Go ahead, Dave. You tackle this one first.
Well, first of all, you are not your work. When anyone, your teacher, supervisor, peers, or whoever is, criticizing, taking time to and assuming it's constructive criticism, that they know that what they're talking about, and they're not just criticizing your work because they want to hurt you, right? Let's say that it's a normal review. What they are reviewing is not you, is the work, and it's not even your work in the large sense of thing. It's that specific piece of work. And as an animator, you have good days, you have less good days, and it doesn't mean that you've created a not so good little piece of animation that all the rest of your career, everything that you've done before, is out of the window. So I would say separate yourself. So they are not judging you, they are judging the thing that you've put on the table, and you ask others to give feedback. So I would say this is probably a good way to avoid being discouraged, if that's something that you would often feel when you're getting feedback. Again, to not have the feeling that you're incompetent, detach yourself from the work. And the other side, the flip side is that might sound completely paradoxical, is detach yourself just enough to not be emotionally hurt by it, but also take it. And if you feel that, I feel incompetent, well, you're not completely incompetent, but yeah, if you want to say that you're not competent enough to have done an amazing job with this shot, okay, well, just accept it. And, that's your little chip on the shoulder to give the extra work to make sure that whatever iteration you're going to do to the shot, or whatever other shots you're going to do, you're going to work extra hard to make sure that you progress. So don't take it personally, but at the same time, take it seriously, and just use it as fuel to progress.
Yeah, I think that so the trick here is, and this is easier said than done, so I do appreciate that, and it's something that we always have to work on. I mean, I tend to be an overly sensitive person, so I struggle with this more than some people do. What I eventually train my brain to do, which is I think can be done by anybody, is, because this is the truth. This is not mental gymnastics. Is to see. It's like what David said. It's like he phrases it by saying, try to somewhat detach your emotions from the situation. And I would frame it. It's essentially doing probably the same thing, just probably worded a little bit differently. It's about understanding that that feeling you're feeling, you're labeling it as incompetence, but what that feeling actually is potential for growth. It is, you are going to, at some point in your career, believe it or not, especially the best animators I know, they will begin to crave that feeling. I know that seems weird now because it might feel like kryptonite to you now, but you're going to get to the point where right now, maybe you're in a phase in your career, and I'm making assumptions here, where you might be a bit new to animating. And so everything feels difficult, and you're trying, and then it's hard when you think you did a good job and someone's like, oh my God, no, it's like, look at this, and this. And you're like, how did I not see these things? Well, you didn't see them because you're new at it. And now you do. Now you're one step closer to seeing that for the next time. And that feeling is eventually going to become less and less often, because you're going to start getting better and you're going to start catching these problems. So when you get a good healthy dose of some feedback that just makes you re-see your shot for the first time, that's going to be an epiphany that you will learn to appreciate and like just hold on to like a brick of gold, because it will become more and more like a unicorn trying to find that level of feedback. So I say develop an appetite. See what's really happening. This is a gift, to be honest with you, that someone's able to take the time to tell you what's working and what's not working. The question that I find difficult, and we can actually segue to that maybe, is something that I don't hear getting asked all the time, but it's something that really I struggle with. What happens when you're working on a show or a project or a game, and your supervisor gives you advice that you really don't agree with? As a matter of fact, you are absolutely convinced it's bad advice because you also heard the director. Not that because often you'll have a supervisor, but then you're going to have a director who's above them, who's your supervisor's boss. You heard it come out of their mouth. They said A, and your supervisor saying B, and now what do? That, my friends, that's a pickle. And that is the kind of thing that you only learn through experience, and you will experience this. Some of you in chat have already experienced this. It does happen because art is subjective, and there's lots of room for interpretation, and people are not perfect, and they're not carbon copies of one another. So there's a bit of what do you say to that question, David? What would you do in a scenario like that?
Yeah, I've seen this played a few times. Again, if there was an easy answer, we wouldn't get into all those situations with people who have 10, 15, 20, 25 years of experience, and they still go in there.
Yeah.
I would say you need to maintain a good relationship with your lead.
Absolutely.
More than the director. So I would say, even if don't use this opportunity to make your lead look bad. Don't do that. Just have a frank exchange with him. I have to say that I disagree with this direction. I think that the director said X 2 weeks ago. I feel that I'm going there, but I will respect that, it's your role to make sure that I'm providing what is needed for this production. I will do it. But at the same time, if I show this in the review and the director says that, no, clearly I needed to go in the other direction, are you going to have my back? Or you're just going to roll me under the bus and pretend that it's not coming from you? So you have this frank exchange of, I'm going to maintain my good relationship with you because I value the fact that you're more my immediate supervisor. But let's say I'm right, and we'll know pretty soon, because tomorrow is dailies and the director will be there. Are you going to stand up for me or not? So that's how I would handle it.
That's good advice right there, because it's true. Because I mean, this is where, you know, conversations like this enter the realm of, like, it's beyond the craft and it ends up being more about the politics of the job. And these things you can learn this the hard way, and the hard way would be for sure becoming enemies with your supervisor, because that doesn't end well. I can tell you that right now. You make war with your supervisor, it's going to become very uncomfortable with you at work. So you better be willing to leave that job if that happens. So you need to.
Don't think that the director will recognize that you were right, your lead was wrong, that your lead is going to feel bad, he's going to apologize, and that's going
that's it. Yeah, you're not going to be protected from some beam of light from the sky that is like, oh, the director notices that you're a genius and that your supervisor doesn't know what they're doing. That's just not the reality. You need to find a way.
And worst case scenario, the director will actually be pissed that you made the lead that he chose to be the lead bad in front of everyone else.
Exactly, because it's bad for everybody that way. It breaks the chain of command, and it's all these other bad things. So yeah, David's advice is very good, because what it says is, look, have a human conversation with your lead. I'm not saying that's always going to be possible, because sometimes people are unfortunately blessed with people that are not necessarily great leads, and for that I do apologize in advance on all the behalf of all leads, because that just happens sometimes. And I don't know how to answer that question, because but the key is don't take it personally. Talk to them, level with them. And like what David said is, if you can maintain your composure and just lay it all out, being like, look, I'm not trying to be difficult. It's because I literally heard the director say this. Maybe I misunderstood, maybe whatever, but that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about going to dailies with something that, like, the director told me to my face. So you're telling me to do something different. It puts me in a weird position. Work it out with your lead. Find a way of strategizing that, because it's your only real way forward. Otherwise, you know, the other paths lead to certain death, or, you know, certain difficulties down the road for sure. Okay, let's bring another one up from the backlog. I hijacked. I asked my own question. Thank you, David, asking answering my question. Okay, here we go. Caption. Here it is. Up right. No. Another overtime question. Surprise, surprise.
Is overtime worth it? Well, I think that you cover well that, you know, ideally overtime is to provide more quality and not just redo things over and over.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a step back from that question, because we are under the assumption that, and rightfully so, that overtime means anything more than 40 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But where is this 40 hours a week coming from? Who decided that a normal work week would be for, what if for you it's 25 hours is enough? And others are like, well, 50, it feels like I'm barely working. Some have family, some don't, some are in a relationship, some don't, some are super healthy, others are dealing with, physical issues there. So I would say first, even about thinking, is overtime worth it or a good thing, or however we want to phrase it. How many hours do you want to work in general? Like, if you say, well, you know what, I'm 50 hours, I'm comfortable, I don't have kids yet, I'm passionate about animation and all that, when right there it tells that, well, 40 hours plus 10 hours of overtime, assuming it's paid, you're fine with it. It's okay. It's within the number of hours that you're comfortable with. So I would say that's the first thing that would make it very different from,
like, know your own limits. Because I agree, because the whole worth it is a measurement of, it's like a comparative sort of
it's my time in return of fulfillment or
what's
salary
your time worth?
Or whatever, or social currency with the rest of my peers. So it should be what I really not like in the workspace is when you start to have culture that glorify overtime. And sometimes it's not like 5 hours of overtime. It's weekends and evening and all that. And you're not a trooper if you're not part of those that stay until 2 a.m. Overtime should be a personal choice. And hopefully you're in a place that they would respectfully ask, okay, who here is available and would like to do overtime? And hopefully the studio will be in a position that, well, if you need more resources to complete the movie, you can outsource a little bit, you can freelance a little bit, you can maybe hire 1 or 2 employees, but they're not going to impose more hours on employees that have no desire to trade more of their time which is a very finite resource, in exchange more money. So is it worth it? It depends. How many hours are you fine to work, and in what context is it? Which is coming back to the point that is it to provide better quality, or is because there was a big either creative direction or management issue in the first place? That's never been, and that's another problem. Sometimes production, they have a budget buffet, a contingency budget of, like, let's say 15% of the entire animation budget, but they don't have plan to hire more people. It's a direct 15% of overtime, and if half of the team is not ready to do overtime, it means that 30% of the time of the team will need to do overtime at some point. So when it's not clearly communicated that people will be asked to do overtime, but there's already a budget for overtime at the end, you can get to a point and if you say, I'm sorry, I cannot do it, and they make you feel ashamed or not part of the team, maybe it might be time to update your resume at the end of that project.
Yeah, I mean, like, you have to remember that there. I mean, and one thing I'll say, like the blue sky version of overtime is, like I said, it's if you're artistically putting in extra hours and you feel like the project's really doing well, and you're putting your extra time in because you just want to make it even that much better, and you'll find that other people are going to be doing the same thing. You'll look from desk to desk. You could see it on people's faces. There's a difference between overtime that people are like excitedly pushing on something to bring it to the next level versus people are just exhausted and doing the overtime because they have no other choice and because they're told they had to. I think it really comes down to, like, what type it's going to be. And I would be lying if I said that even great studios that, that overtime is more often, hopefully the better kind. You're going to be in situations from time to time on a milestone where there's going to be, like, probably a week here or there or maybe even 2 weeks where there's going to be these crunch periods where you might need to put in maybe an additional 10 or maybe even sometimes an additional 20 hours for that week. That's normal. That's just production. And because there's as far as I'm concerned, I've never worked at a job where that doesn't happen ever. So I think that the idea of, if that idea is not interesting to you, that you're going to have to, for sure, at some point, probably put in a bit of overtime, regardless of the motivation, then you might have a hard time in a production job. Because I think that, like I said, it's rare to find studios that got it so figured out that it never happens. Another thing that's important to note is know what it is. Like, overtime, depending on the company, they have different policies. I know a lot of game companies, they don't necessarily pay out overtime. What they do instead is they do overtime in lieu. So what that means is you'll put the time in that's extra. So, like, let's say over a course of a couple weeks, you're shipping something and there's like 4 weeks there where you put an extra 20 hours in a week, which is a lot. 60 hours a week is a lot. It's not very sustainable, but it happens. I'm just using it as an example. What that would mean is you'd get 2 weeks off paid vacation on top of the normal vacation that you would normally get. So that's a very popular thing. Most of the game companies I have worked for in the past, that is the policy that they use. So that's another thing you might want to ask, is maybe, does that work for you? Because if you're a family person, that might be more valuable than the money up front. You know what I mean? Like, because at the end of the day, it's not really about the money. It's about not having time with your family. And during a summer vacation, it gets ruined. So, like, okay, fine, maybe we ship this thing in August and we take an extended vacation in September or something like that. Like, there's maybe more, depending on your lifestyle and your situation, one might be better than the other. And it'd be worth asking what the policy is.
Yeah. Brent, we're already,
holy crap,
already been 1 hour.
That's ridiculous.
I know.
It felt like we just started getting into it. You want to do one more and then we can,
sure, one more.
The tricky part is, and I don't know, so I need to look into a way of being able to get access to the questions. Because I don't show them during the stream in the video, it's a little trickier to do. Like, I can, the long story short is there's no guarantee that I'm going to get the questions that came up in the stream. So what I would suggest you do, if you did ask a question that you really wanted to get answered and you wanted to be in our backlog of questions, I would suggest heavily that you actually post it on Facebook, or you send it to us some way. Like, do you know where Scott's getting most of those questions from? Is it Facebook?
I think it's from the Instagram, mostly, in the
okay, so
comments.
Pick your favorite platform and be like, hey, Brent told me to post my questions here, and people will be seeing that. We'll make sure that they migrate over to this list.
Yesterday there was a post about this Q&A session on Instagram. So just go there, just in the comment section, place your question there, and those will automatically be added in our spreadsheet for upcoming Q&A sessions.
I think we'll probably fine tune this process. So there's always an easy inbox or some place to just put your question, no matter when and where that occurs to you in your brain, so that it finds its way to this list is, I think, what we'll naturally have to sort out, but we'll have news on that later. This is a new format. We're just trying it. So, okay, good. So let's see here. Yeah, I like it. It's a good one. It's clearly people aren't short questions, which is a good sign that we're barking up the right tree. So I got a question. So it looks like Girly Bits did get one of the questions. I got a bunch of them there, but I'll ask the first one because we only have time for the one. So that will be, let's see here. It says, what are the goals with educational content versus learning paths? Our first Agora question. Yes. How can those goals be communicated when someone goes to the library? Good question. Do you want me to tackle this one?
I'm going to let you tackle this one.
Okay. So
I know the learning path is your baby, so
yeah,
so go for it.
So here's the thing: learning path is got big aspirations. Okay, so what essentially it is in a nutshell is learning paths are going to be curated episodic content that will be eventually in like very well organized playlists. I don't know if everyone actually has ever been on Udemy before. We're using Udemy as a bit of a kind of a concept to kind of wrap our head around. We're going to take our own take on this, but we see that kind of way of dealing with this kind of content kind of pop up from in other places in different forms as well. So we figure it's probably a good way to start. So what you're going to eventually see is that a learning path will have its own, like, essentially playlist. It will be very obvious in the content library. It already has its own category. So if you go to like the library, you can choose learning content. Right now, there's just two different types. There's two different tracks in there. And we're only dropping a couple of them usually every week, just so that we can kind of, keep the ball rolling and not necessarily. We may decide when we have enough of this stuff that we might do like what Netflix does and just drop it all for binge watching. In hindsight, that's probably going to be more interesting for people. But because we didn't have all the stuff online, we didn't want to do that right away, which is why it might feel like kind of a half-baked implementation, because it is. We wanted to get it out there so people could start seeing the content, get an idea as to what it's going to be. It's just not in its full form yet. So the full thing would be playlist that you can see chronologically, tracking your progress, even a gamification that's going to be get added to this, like a badge for completion, something that will eventually then show up in your profile that hasn't also, it's a feature that hasn't come out yet, where we want everyone to have their own individual profiles on the Agora platform. So like this, it's so woven into some of the bigger overarching plans we have for the community, but we didn't want to hold off and just like, we had a bunch of people already creating content, and David and I agreed, well, even though it's not all there yet as far as the infrastructure, let's just put it out there because people can watch these things and get an idea as to what's coming down the pipe. So I don't know if I answered that fully, but
I would say the way I see it is everything that is in the learning path, because in our mind we kind of have a tree of knowledge that okay, on the big branch you would have animation, and then a smaller branch that is creature animation, and a smaller branch that is going to be quadruped, and an even smaller branch that's going to be within quadruped, like feline or something like that. So you can see that, and then those paths go all over the place. So you can just learn like, okay, the big branch, okay, just the basic of creature, the basic of mocap, the basic of biped and all that, or you can dive super deep into a specific branch, and we're going to add more of those over time. So anything that is part of this big long-term master plan of let's slowly build all of those little branch and provide this content for free on the platform, this is all the learning path. Everything else, it could be a tutorial, it could be a tips and tricks, it could be a workshop recording from another online school. It can be anything that kind of falls into the umbrella of education, whether it's mostly coming from the outside of Agora.Community that is not directly part of this special project, would be flagged as educational content. So both are kind of similar in a way, but learning paths, there's a special master plan between how all of those paths are together going to create this tree of knowledge. Everything else educational content. There's amazing stuff in there. It's just that it's not specifically part of this big picture.
And a lot of a lot of the educational content, if not most of it, is all from people that we've affiliated with. So it's stuff that's already out there that like we just brought in here so we can give people some visibility on that type of content, where the the learning paths are stuff that we're kind of typically developing from the ground up and partnering up with people, and they're building out the content from scratch. It's very bespoke, and it's going to be premiering on the content creator owns the content. It's just that they've agreed to put it on our platform first. And so that's where it will be. And the cool thing is, like I said, it's going to be wrapped up with a bunch of other really cool layers, like the gamification, as well as the tracking, as well as even like being able to offer specifically, be able to like post supporting data you can download. So like say say there's a project and it's Unreal, it's a learning path about Unreal, and there's an Unreal project that they want you to download that you can sort of use in the learning path. That's the kind of thing that we'll support in these very specific types. So yeah, they're similar. It's just that one's very Agora driven and the other one is more like Agora hosted, I think is probably a good way of sort of differentiating. Now, another important note is another plan we had was for these learning paths is to actually connect reference, like when you're going through a learning path at the end or even during, to be able to like point at things that are actually on the platform that are like educational content by somebody else. So let's say that it's a whole thing on like Marco Folia. He's building we already built, we just haven't put it all on the platform yet, a series on introducing animation of a quadruped. We can also eventually be able to say, hey, other things we might suggest you watch are these. They're all quadruped related, and you might want to it could be great for further watching once you get through the actual learning path. But where do you go from here? Well, look at these videos for starters. So it's kind of a way of connecting everything as well, and it's a bit more of a guided, curated experience through learning a topic. Yep. Okay, I guess that's it. We've done it.
That's
1 hour.
It. Wow,
okay.
1 hour. It goes so fast.
We
didn't tackle half of what we thought that we
barely scratched the surface. I'm going to have to go in there and make sure I check mark the ones that we actually did answer. So yeah, so if you didn't get your question answered, then yes, please do get it to us somehow, because we do want to answer it. It just, there's only so much time in an hour. So feel free to, for now, find that Instagram post, maybe post your question there. I think someone suggested that we maybe have a Google form or something like that, which would make sense because it would just go and dump right away onto a sheet. That probably will be something we'll consider doing. One way or another, it will be a little bit more straightforward, but for now, just post it on social media. We'll find it and get it on this list. Okay, so thanks for everyone who showed up today. It was fun to try this new type of format. We will do this more regularly. I think David and I want to try to get to the point where we're even doing it maybe once a week. Yeah, why not? I mean, clearly there's enough questions for it. And like I said, when to spice things up a little bit, we'll be bringing in maybe a special guest from time to time. Maybe it's not always David and I. Maybe there's going to be David and somebody else, or me and somebody else, or maybe just some random person all by themselves. The point is, we will have people in here to sort of try to specialize in different areas, so that gives you maybe a bit more of a deep dive on a topic that you might want to get some answers on. So again, thanks again for everybody showing up. Thank you, David. I'll see you out.
Thanks, Brent.
Take care. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. And thank you for everybody else who did show up today. It means a lot to us. Keep animated. See you around the community. Cheers.
Dun.